Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello and welcome. I hope you are well, and I'm happy to be here today with you. Today's episode is a bit lighter, following on the backs of some pretty serious ones, although I think anything about relationships can be quite serious. So today could feel kind of serious, but I think it's kind of I find that what we're talking about today almost funny in a way. So I feel like it's a little bit lighter. I really want to simply give you something to start to pay attention to in yourself, to shine some light on this pretty unconscious thing that I first discovered inside of myself. And again, we can look at things inside of ourselves, at things that can come up and be issues in our relationship from a place of self-blame and like heaviness and super seriosity, or we can kind of do it with a little bit of curiosity, with lots of curiosity in the sense of lightness and even a sense of humor. So I do invite you to bring that attitude if possible as you do this. But I did notice this first in myself, and then I started seeing it in my clients as well. And it's a thing that causes us a lot of suffering in our relationships, and our partners are not served by it either. And of course, nor is our relationship. And that is what I am going to call reverse sexism. And yes, this is for you, anyone listening in, because on some level, most of us have or still are doing sexism in reverse in our relationship. And maybe it's very subtle, right? But it is something very worth looking at and paying attention to. But before I dive into that and how it affects relationships and all the goodies, I want to let you know about a new free helpful thing that I have made for you. I have something that's been a long time in the works, really years of learning and working with HSPs and relationship. This is a culmination of a lot of that work, and it is another quiz. And yes, I am a big quiz fan because they're the second best way after coaching and talking directly with you for me to give you in your specific relationship the most personally tailored help and advice. Obviously, actually talking and working with you is best, but quizzes really nail down your obstacles to overcome and your areas of growth in order to have a great marriage and give you help with that. Like, there's no other way I can sort of filter that specific information than these adjustable quizzes that give unique results for each and every one of you. So this quiz is called How Much is High Sensitivity Impacting Your Relationship? It's not only going to help you know if you even are highly sensitive, like 25% of people, because although most of you listening have probably self-identified as an HSP, some of you might not be sure. But if you are an HSP, a highly sensitive person, you obviously want to know, because high sensitivity has a major impact on your relationship, for better or worse. So this quiz is also going to help you gauge how well you've been learning to work with your trait of high sensitivity, if you do indeed have it. And that really is relevant for everybody listening, even if you already know for sure you're highly sensitive. So go take this 3-minute free quiz to discover if you're highly sensitive and how deeply it's affecting you and your happiness in your relationship. You're also going to get your next steps for making sure sensitivity works for your relationship instead of against it. And to take the quiz, I'm just going to put the direct link in the show notes. That's probably the best place to find it. Or you can head over to my website. And right now, the only way that it shows up on the website is as a pop-up. So you just head to hspmarriagecoaching.com and you wait a second or so, and it should pop up this little pop-up thing. And you click that button, it will take you directly to the quiz. this will be good information for every single one of you listening to have. So go do it. All right, let's dive in. So recently, I was coaching a lovely client, and she had been learning how to be very transparent, authentic, and open with herself. So I call that TAO, and there's actually a whole podcast that I made on this, which is episode 104. And TAO, being transparent, authentic, and open with yourself, is one of the very first things I teach my clients to do well, to do thoroughly. And so she had spent the week really looking deeply at the beliefs she had kind of like under the surface of things around her marriage. And she shared with me how she'd noticed a funny thing. She had this long-held idea that since her husband was a man, he was the one who should automatically take care of the dog. She said it had been modeled to her from her family that that's what men do. They are in charge of the dog. We had a little bit of a laugh about this, and then we talked about how that was pretty sexist, right? And she admitted that. And it was kind of in that moment that a more clear light bulb went off for me, and I knew I needed to share this with more people. I mean, again, I'd seen this in myself and I'd seen it in other clients, and maybe we'd even talked about it to some degree, like in a subtler way, but I had never thought of it as like, oh my gosh, this is reverse sexism. Women really haven't had to look at their sexist biases as much as men, right? There's no male revolution, no masculine revolution. Right? Not saying that there needs to be, although I actually do think there needs to be, and maybe there is one underway in terms of men becoming more sensitive and such, right? But many of the unconscious beliefs that many women have about men are causing a lot of pain for us in our intimate relationships. Just a small splattering of those beliefs are things like men should take care of the dog, men should pay the bills, men should fix the shelf, men should be stable, strong, a secure pillar in the relationship, men should be unreactive, the steady one, men should be great at relationship, even if I'm not, or like my man should be great at relationship, even if I'm not. Men should have it figured out. After all, they are men. Right? And the message that we've received unconsciously so much of our lives is that men are in charge. Men are the capable ones. Men are the strong ones. Men are the center of the universe. So, it makes sense that we'd have some of these beliefs deep down. Now, you may not consciously believe any of the things that I just said, but most likely, because you live in this world, these types of ideas have crept into you to some degree, on some level, at least some of them. Now, that was not an extensive list by any means. And in a little while, I'm going to ask you to start looking for what your personal, quote unquote, reverse sexist beliefs may be. But first, let's talk a little bit about why it's a problem. And aren't men different from women? And yes, those are excellent questions. And absolutely, we are different. And we do not always need the same exact types of treatment and, ways of being with each other. In fact, I've talked about this some before, that we have different brains and biology, right? Men and women actually do have some big differences in their physiology, in their brains that affects our behavior, our way of thinking, our way of relating, and ideally, we really do take that into consideration in our relationships so we can interact in the most loving ways in our marriages. And I'm actually even hoping to have a specific guest on the podcast to elaborate on the differences between men and women and how understanding them can actually make or break a marriage. So yes, we are different, and that's important. But made up, arbitrary, cultural rules or expectations or ideas about how a man should be versus how a woman should be are almost always going to cause problems in the kind of modern relationship we women want. Unconsciously, wordlessly assigning your spouse a specific role in your relationship without you even realizing you're doing it, and definitely without him realizing it, really wreaks havoc. And again, because we live in the world that we live in, that has tons of these, what I call arbitrary ideas about how men and women should be. Even if a lot of them are outdated, we've all absorbed these ideas on some level, however unconsciously. And if we do not become aware of these sexist beliefs and move past them, we will keep feeling incredibly judgy of our partner, and we'll feel so much frustration and resentment and anger and disappointment and even hurt when our men inevitably, quote unquote, violate these ideas, these rules, these expectations that we have. I mean, the reason my client and I were even talking about the dog and this sexist idea that she had, that her husband was the one who was supposed to take care of the dog, is because I think he did something not so great with the dog. Like, he wasn't doing a perfect job at caring for the dog. Like, he didn't take the dog out for a walk or something at one point, and it really upset her. And she was really frustrated with him, right? And obviously that frustration wouldn't have been as strong if she didn't have this underlying belief that he is the one who's supposed to do that, right? It wasn't an agreement that they made. It was an unspoken assumption that she had. And that gave rise to all this resentment and frustration when he didn't follow that unspoken rule. In all of those hard feelings, the hurt that may arise, the disappointment, the resentment, the anger, the frustration that arises when our man doesn't follow the ideas we have about what men should do, that's going to show up in how we interact with him, how we treat him, the tone of our voice, right? Our way of reacting to him. And therefore, that's going to greatly influence how he reacts and interacts with us. Almost always for the worse. I mean, this is an excellent source of arguments. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own reverse sexist beliefs, which were my husband should say affectionate things to me, whereas, of course, I didn't have that responsibility myself as a woman. He should be the one to initiate sex. And of course, that wasn't my job because I'm a woman. He should fix anything around the house that requires tools, like a hammer or a drill, even though I was perfectly capable of, drilling a hole. So those are just a few that were like the most top of mind. But when I first realized I had these sexist ideas or rules about how my husband should do things or show up in a relationship, I really did notice that they influenced how I treated him. And then, of course, how he would relate to me. So, for example, I'd be displeased or low-grade upset with him if he hadn't said something affectionate in a while, no matter that I hadn't said anything affectionate to him in a while. And from that upset place, I'd be a little testy with him. I'd complain about how he wasn't being loving. And that, of course, didn't inspire him to want to be loving, right? Like, why would it? Usually he'd get defensive, and then a little rift would open further. So this is not a recipe for more connection and harmony and loving reciprocity. But this is what we humans do when we have ideas or expectations we want others to live up to, even if they are unfair and unrealistic. We feel let down, we feel disappointed, we feel hurt and resentful at the person who didn't live up to our expectations. And we tend to take it out on them, even though it was really our expectations, our ideas, our rules, our sexist ideas even, that were the problem. And they will often then react back at us in a negative way. And again, that rift will just widen. In fact, whole marriages have collapsed over this. Perhaps this is the biggest reason why marriages fall apart. And I don't just mean with sexist ideas, but this general idea of rules we have in relationships. Now, as a side note, these ideas or expectations can be fine, of course, if they are outright discussed and agreed upon. If you communicate about them and your spouse explicitly agrees to say, always be in charge of the dog, right? Or always initiate sex. Really, this isn't a problem then. Well, especially if he follows through on that agreement. And of course, there is a chance that he may like to be the one to take on a certain role. Like my husband has no problem being the main one to wield a hammer and a saw around the house. It really is the unspoken, almost always unconscious rules or roles that we assign that are problematic. So now it's your turn to be transparent, authentic, and open with yourself and ask yourself with lightness, with curiosity, maybe even with a good dose of humor, what do I subconsciously believe from my less wise self, from my less practical, rational self? What do I subconsciously believe a man's job is in our life that I don't believe is also my job? Another way of putting that is, what do I think my husband's roles are in our relationship that I don't also believe is my job or my role? Really do this. Really take some time. Maybe not at this moment. You can listen to the rest of the podcast and then sit down and answer that question. But see what you find. Because once you see your own sexist biases, it is often enough to be able to drop them, right? To eradicate those rules, because they are often so obviously hypocritical and even funny, like my client with the belief that a man should take care of the dog, right? So they're often so funny and hypocritical that it's hard to take them seriously anymore. And of course, if you do find one that feels true to you, and this is not uncommon either. Like, there are definitely some things like it's his job to initiate sex. Like, that might, for example, feel really true to you. Or like a man should be the one to stay really calm in a fight. Perhaps that feels really true to you, if that's a belief that you have. If that's the case, then I highly recommend you spend some time with my podcast episode, The Relationship Rulebook. That's episode 127. It will guide you through a process to help you let go of this rule if you want to. You can always keep it, of course, but do notice what happens inside of you and your relationship when you have the rule and your spouse inevitably doesn't follow it one day. Nothing good will come of it, I guarantee. But even then, even if you see that it's not serving you or your relationship, you don't have to let go of the rule. It's a free country, or at least it was. But you will likely want to let go of it because it will free you and your relationship up to feel lighter and a lot more loving. So yeah, the Relationship Rulebook podcast episode is pretty gold for this. It's one of the more deep, thorough episodes that I've done to help support you with letting go of beliefs that don't serve you. Of course, the best way to do this is 100% working one-to-one with me or someone who's really good at this. But feel free to listen to and follow what I share in the Relationship Rulebook podcast episode as a starting place. Before I hop off today, I do want to revisit one area I noticed that we're very unconsciously, we unconsciously tend to fall into reverse sexism a fair amount as women. And I did already mention it, but I have noticed many times that clients have this underlying sense, and I myself had this in a big way for years without seeing it, that the man is the security structure in the relationship, that he should be the pillar of stability for us, for the relationship. In other words, we unconsciously tend to look to our man to gauge whether our relationship is going well or not, because he's a guy. He should be strong and somehow magically knowledgeable about love and great relationships. Put another way, we tend to center his sense of how things are going over our own. And, this is on top of mind because I was talking with a different client just a couple of days ago about this, how her partner had not been in the best mood. And you could tell she could tell, or she felt like he wasn't deeply enjoying their relationship at the moment, but she was feeling like the relationship was good. And she had this sort of unconscious part of her that was like making his experience in the relationship sort of the gauge or the indicator of whether the relationship was going well, even though she was feeling really good about the relationship. But when she was kind of letting him like, oh, well, maybe he's not so happy. Look what happens, right? This whole spin out can happen. And suddenly she's not sure about the relationship either because he's not sure about the relationship. And so it's giving him a lot of power. It's making him the center and really the security structure of the relationship. And it kind of comes from this place inside of us that's like, oh, well, he's the man. He must know best. I'm just a lowly woman. So what do I know? Right. And that, I mean, maybe it doesn't show up in your head like that, but there is a sense of that in a lot of us, I think. And that really is the voice of the patriarchal, sexist past. And it is not serving you or your relationship. because of course, you are a powerful, amazing woman. And in fact, you make a better center, a better pillar of strength and security and loving relationality. You make a better gauge of how the relationship is going. And when you lead the relationship from this place, when you show up without the sexist biases, right, and the irritable resentfulness that comes from it, the hurt that breeds, you propel the relationship into great places. You are the most powerful one, the force of love to be reckoned with. And now that I think about it, it's not really reverse sexism we're talking about today. It's actually just the same old sexism, but it's us as women playing it out. And it is an act of aggression against ourselves and against the love we want in our lives. So let's root out this sexism. Let's stop making him in charge of so much. Let's look into ourselves and peel away those toxic layers of sexism and replace it with understanding our own power, our own immense capacity for love and creating harmony and cooperation and reciprocal supportiveness in our relationships. Let's truly understand the differences in our brains and physiology as men and women and use that knowledge to even better relate and have even deeper love and intimacy with our husbands. And let's let go of those arbitrary made-up stories about how men and women should be. So start today by looking at what sexist rules or ideas have lodged themselves in you and start setting them free. And as usual, I'm here to coach one-to-one with you to really take anything that came up for you here a lot deeper and do everything that you and your relationship need to make that relationship into one that feels so fulfilling and peaceful and loving and good to you. So you can learn all about coaching one-to-one with me at the links in the description for this podcast, as well as over at hspmarriagecoaching.com, where you will also find the free quiz, How Much is High Sensitivity Impacting Your Relationship? So definitely go hit that up and find out so you can take the next steps in making sure sensitivity is working for you and making your relationship the best one that it can possibly be. All right, my dears, be oh so well.